While you're refreshing your feed for the third time this hour, someone else is in hour 9 of building what will eventually extract resources from people exactly like you. They're not more talented. They're not luckier. They simply refused to stop when their nervous system started screaming for relief. Nietzsche understood something the comfort-addicted will never grasp. The person who becomes dangerous, who accumulates actual power, is merely the one willing to endure what you rationalize yourself out of. Your comfort isn't rest. It's a cage you've decorated with streaming subscriptions and weekend plans. Your quitting isn't self-awareness. It's the lock you turn every time something requires more than you're willing to give. Look at your patterns honestly for once. You start things. You feel that initial dopamine surge of possibility. Then the resistance comes, the part where it actually gets difficult, where your competence is tested against reality, and you perform the same pathetic ritual you've performed dozens of times before. You tell yourself a story. You weren't passionate about it anyway. It wasn't aligned with your values. You need to focus on self-care. You're being smart by knowing when to quit. These are the lullabies you sing yourself while your potential rots. Every abandoned project, every business idea you let die, every skill you quit learning when it stopped being fun, they don't just disappear. They pile up in your psyche as evidence. Evidence that you can't trust yourself. Evidence that when things get real, you fold. This evidence compounds, it builds an identity. You become someone who quits. And that identity dictates your financial reality, your relationship dynamics, your entire position in the hierarchy. The psychological cost of this pattern is something you feel but refuse to name. It's that background resentment you carry. That bitterness when you see someone else winning in the arena you abandoned. Nietzsche called this ressentiment, and it's the defining characteristic of the powerless. You learn to cope with your weakness not by overcoming it, but by reframing strength itself as somehow wrong. The person who didn't quit, who built the business, who developed the skill, who accumulated the wealth, you can't admit they simply had more endurance than you. That truth is too painful. So you create a moral framework where their success becomes evidence of their moral failure. They're obsessed. They're unbalanced. They've sacrificed their humanity. They're toxic. This is how the weak protect themselves from the mirror of their own inadequacy. You demonize in others what you failed to cultivate in yourself. You've been marinated in an ideology that treats struggle as pathology. Every difficulty is trauma. Every challenge is a sign you should pivot. Every moment of discomfort is your authentic self telling you to stop. This is a brilliant control mechanism, not a conspiracy, just an emergent property of a system that benefits from your domestication. Comfortable people are predictable. They consume, they comply, they don't build competing power structures. The entire therapeutic corporate complex has rebranded weakness as wisdom. Setting boundaries, which actually means avoiding anything that requires sacrifice. Honoring your energy, which actually means quitting when you don't feel like it. Protecting your peace, which actually means never entering the arena where actual wealth and power are contested. Society doesn't reward conquest anymore, at least not openly. It rewards the performance of compliance. Show up, do your tasks, don't make waves, extract your salary, repeat until you're too old to remember what you actually wanted. This is slave morality at industrial scale. The entire system is designed to celebrate safety over sovereignty. You're taught to worship balance, moderation, reasonableness. These aren't virtues, they're sedatives. They keep you in your lane while others build the roads. The modern religion is self-care, and its commandment is simple. Never push yourself beyond what feels good. Never enter the fire. Never test your limits. Stay comfortable, stay safe, stay weak, stay poor. The statistics are vicious in their clarity. 99% quit the moment the work stops being enjoyable and starts being actual work. The moment the business requires more capital than they're comfortable risking. The moment the skill development enters the plateau phase where progress is invisible. The moment their discipline is tested against their desire for immediate relief. They quit, and they join the chorus of the defeated, explaining why quitting was actually the intelligent choice. 1% understand something different. They understand that the moment everyone else quits is precisely the moment the entire game changes. Scarcity creates value. When everyone else is fleeing the discomfort, you're eliminating competition with every day you continue. The marketplace, whether it's financial markets or sexual markets or status hierarchies, rewards rare behaviors. Endurance past the point of enjoyment is the rarest behavior there is. They'll come for you when you refuse to quit. Not with violence, but with language. You'll be called obsessed, and you are. But obsession is simply focused intensity that makes the unfocused uncomfortable. You'll be called unbalanced, and you are, because balance is what people pursue when they've abandoned the possibility of dominance in any single domain. You'll be called extreme, toxic, unhealthy. These labels aren't observations, they're weapons. When someone calls your discipline toxic, what they're actually saying is that your choices make them feel bad about their own. You're a mirror showing them what they could be if they were willing to pay the price. They need you to stop or to fail, because your persistence is an indictment of their quitting. Your discipline reveals their weakness. So they'll try to pull you back into the comfort zone, back into the herd, using the language of concern and care. They'll tell you they're worried about you. What they're actually worried about is the growing distance between your trajectory and theirs. This is the comfortable prison. You're free to do anything except the things that would actually change your position. You're encouraged to dream, but punished for the obsessive execution that makes dreams material. You're told you can be anything, while every incentive structure pushes you toward being nothing in particular. The cage isn't locked from the outside. You lock it yourself every time you choose comfort over growth. Every time you quit when it gets hard, every time you listen to people who have nothing you want. Your jailer is your own nervous system's preference for ease. Your sentence is self-imposed, and the tragedy isn't that you're trapped. It's that you've learned to call your cage freedom. The moment you decide not to quit something genuinely difficult, you've committed an act of violence against the social order. Not metaphorical violence. Actual violence against the invisible architecture that needs you compliant, predictable, and weak. Because here's what they don't tell you about persistence through genuine hardship. It's not inspirational, it's not beautiful, and it sure as hell isn't going to get you celebrated until after you've already won. What it does is separate you biologically from the herd. Your brain starts rebuilding itself. Your risk tolerance recalibrates. Your ability to endure discomfort without the narcotic of immediate validation becomes your unfair advantage in a world addicted to dopamine and approval. Every hard thing you refuse to quit is compound interest on your character, and character in the marketplace is currency. Not the currency they teach you about in school. The currency that opens doors before you knock. The currency that makes people nervous in your presence because they can sense you've been through fires they've only read about. Neuroplasticity isn't some academic concept. It's the mechanism by which you reprogram yourself from prey to predator. Every time you push through when your body is screaming to stop, when your bank account is threatening you, when every reasonable person is telling you to be realistic, you're laying down new neural pathways that the comfortable will never develop. You're building scar tissue, and scar tissue is stronger than regular tissue. The market doesn't reward talent, it rewards scarcity. And endurance through genuine suffering is the ultimate scarcity because 99% of people will quit the moment the gap between their effort and their results becomes uncomfortable. They'll quit when their friends start asking questions. They'll quit when their family stages an intervention about their obsession. They'll quit when 6 months in they're still broke and exhausted and no one's applauding. That gap, that valley between starting and succeeding, is designed to filter you out. It's not a bug. It's a feature. The suffering isn't the obstacle to your success. It's the filtration system that ensures most people never get to compete with you. Look at anyone who controls significant resources, anyone who's built real wealth, anyone who's architected genuine power. Go back to their obscurity period. The years no one was watching. The years they were getting destroyed financially, socially, psychologically. What separated them wasn't intelligence. The world is full of brilliant people who are broke. It wasn't opportunity. Opportunity is everywhere for those who've prepared themselves to be dangerous. What separated them was their willingness to endure the specific suffering their goal required, while everyone around them chose comfort. They understood something the herd never will, that your willingness to suffer intelligently is your only sustainable competitive advantage. When you stop quitting, you stop being prey. This isn't metaphor. Your entire energy changes. People can sense it. The desperate need for external validation falls away because you've validated yourself through action. The fear of judgment dissolves because you've been judged by something harsher than any critic, reality itself, and you're still standing. You start moving through the world with the quiet certainty of someone who knows they can endure. And that certainty is terrifying to people who've built their entire identity around their limitations. The biological reality is simple. Stress plus recovery equals evolution. Not just physical evolution, financial evolution, social evolution. The evolution of your capacity to handle complexity, uncertainty, and pressure without breaking. But here's the part they leave out. The stress has to be real. Scrolling through hardship porn on social media doesn't count. Reading about someone else's struggle doesn't count. You have to actually be in the fire. Your bank account has to actually be threatening you. Your body has to actually be exhausted. Your social circle has to actually be questioning your sanity. That's when the adaptation happens. That's when you're being forged into something the comfortable version of you could never become. Every person who didn't quit in obscurity and now controls the narrative has the same story. Years of being called crazy, years of watching people with less skill and more willingness to compromise pass them by, years of wondering if they were delusional. And then the inflection point. Not because the universe rewarded their persistence with some mystical breakthrough, but because they'd spent years building capabilities in the dark that suddenly became valuable in the light. They weren't lucky. They were prepared in ways that looked like insanity until it looked like genius. Your willingness to love your struggle or be destroyed by it isn't optional if you want real power. This is the part where most people's brains shut off because they've been conditioned to believe that suffering is something to be avoided, medicated, or therapized away. But suffering is information. It's telling you where you're weak. It's showing you what needs to be rebuilt. It's filtering out the people who were never serious. When you learn to move toward the hard thing instead of away from it, when you learn to interpret pain as data instead of as a stop signal, you've hacked the operating system that keeps most people trapped. The market rewards scarce behaviors. Everyone can start. Starting is free. Starting gets you social media engagement and encouraging comments from people who will never do it themselves. But continuing when it's hard, when you're isolated, when there's no evidence it's working, when you've been grinding for months or years with nothing to show for it but debt and exhaustion, that behavior is so rare it's almost exotic. And because it's rare, it's valuable. The person who can endure uncertainty without needing constant reassurance, who can work in obscurity without needing an audience, who can delay gratification for years while their peers are optimizing for weekend plans, that person is dangerous. That person is going to take resources from people who never saw them coming. Comment overcome if you've chosen the hard path while everyone around you chose comfort. Tell me what you're refusing to quit on. I read every single one because the people in this comment section are the only ones having the real conversation. Everyone else is still pretending that success comes from vision boards and positive thinking instead of from your willingness to be uncomfortable longer than the competition. Subscribe if you're done with motivational lies and ready for operational philosophy. This channel isn't for people who want to feel inspired. It's for the 1% who understand that transformation requires sacrifice the herd will never make. The subscribe button is right there, and clicking it is a choice to opt out of the comfortable delusions and opt into the operational reality of how power actually transfers. Here's what actually happens when you don't quit something hard. First, you lose people. Your friends who bonded with you over complaining suddenly don't know what to do with your discipline. Your family who loved you when you were safe and predictable starts treating you like you're in a cult. The people who were there when you started disappear when you're in the middle, because the middle is boring and hard and there's nothing to celebrate yet. This isn't a cost. This is the filter working. These people were never going to come with you anyway. They were anchors disguised as support systems. Second, you develop a tolerance for chaos that becomes your unfair advantage. While everyone else is having emotional breakdowns over minor setbacks, you're calm. Not because you're more enlightened, but because you've been through worse. You've had worse months, worse years, worse failures. Your baseline for what constitutes a real problem has been recalibrated. What sends other people into paralysis is just Tuesday for you. This emotional scar tissue is more valuable than any degree, any connection, any inheritance. It's the thing that lets you act when others freeze. Third, you start seeing patterns, the comfortable miss. When you're actually in the arena getting hit, you learn things that observers never learn. You learn which advice is theoretical garbage from people who've never done it. You learn which strategies actually work under pressure versus which ones sound good in podcasts. You learn who's real and who's performing. This pattern recognition becomes your edge. You make better decisions faster because you've paid the tuition of real experience. Fourth, your relationship with time changes. Most people are optimizing for the next 3 months. You're thinking in years. You're making moves that won't pay off until long after everyone who's watching has gotten bored and left. This time horizon asymmetry is devastating. While they're chasing quick wins and pivoting every quarter, you're building infrastructure that becomes unstoppable. Compounding only works if you stay in long enough for it to compound. And finally, you become illegible to the systems designed to predict and control you. The algorithms don't know what to do with you. The social structures don't have a box for you. The people who make their living explaining why things can't be done have no framework for someone who just did it anyway. This illegibility is power. When you can't be categorized, you can't be controlled. When you can't be predicted, you can't be prevented. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but only if you stay in the fire long enough to be forged. Most people pull out the moment it gets hot. They mistake the heat for a signal to quit when it's actually the signal that the transformation is beginning. The weak quit, the strong become.